Hey everyone, this is Derrick Bros with the Conscious Resistance Network and 90.1 KPFT Houston, and today I'm excited to talk with an old friend and bring you guys a new interview with my friend Rob Greenfield. Before we talk to Rob, though, I want to remind you, or just let you know if you hadn't found out before, we've actually interviewed Rob before. It's been, holy crap, 3 years now, December 4th, 2015. You can find that on our YouTube channel, Sustainable Adventure on the Path to Happiness, Health, and Freedom. And also 2017, I did a video, not an interview with Rob, but a video about Rob called Talk to Neighbors, Not to Cops, where Rob shares a story about somebody stealing his bike and just how he went about that situation. I thought that was a good time to just discuss that concept, how we can get closer to our neighbors. But without further ado, Rob, how are you doing?
Pretty good. You also forgot to mention our time at Standing Rock together.
Oh yeah, that was a big thing for me because that was, well, I think it was a big thing for both of us, but it was the first time we actually got to connect face to face and spend a little bit of time together, so that was cool.
Yeah.
And I was thankful for that. I was actually just thinking about that earlier today, how that was such a big time for obviously the people there, but just the whole country and everybody in general who experienced it, whether through live streams or we were there at the pretty much the worst of the blizzard part of it, or at least some of the worst of it. It got down to like negative 14 or 15 degrees,
Oh, rough.
which is for me, like I know you're from colder places. That was the coldest I've ever dealt with. And I think I've probably had my fill. I don't think I ever plan to go back to that. But anyways, man, how are you doing?
Pretty good. It's another cold day actually, but only about 40 down here, and I'm in Orlando. And yeah, I'm inside my tiny house. It's good. Living the simple life. I'm not doing much traveling currently because of my current project, and I gotta say, life is pretty good.
That's good to hear, man. So, again, if you haven't seen the past interviews, I do want to invite you to go check that out because that gives more of a background in the longer history of Rob and his change from. I was looking here at your timeline on your website, and it says from like drunken nuisance or something like that, environmental nuisance, and to now a dude making a difference. And just give a brief rundown, though. You don't have to tell the whole story, but a little bit about that journey.
Sure. Yeah, 2011 is really when my new journey started. Before that, I was living a fairly typical American life. I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. You know, every Sunday I would shine up my new car and vacuum it out and make sure it looked really good. You know, I had the idea that I'd, eventually want a big house and just that sort of what's referred to as the American dream. I had really bought into that. Um, and then what happened was I started to watch a lot of documentaries and read a lot of books and just started to realize, wow, that American dream is not what I thought. It actually is, it's actually destroying everything that I love. It's destroying people around the world. It's destroying the other species that we share the earth with, and it's just destroying the earth as a whole, all of the ecosystems that give us life. And so then I decided I had to change my life so that it was actually in alignment, because the thing was, I always believed in living a life that was good for the world, but I just didn't realize that all my actions were, counter to that. So that's when I decided, all right, got to change my life, and I started one bit at a time and just transformed over a period of a few years.
And along with that, you've done, I mean, a number of, I don't like to call them stunts, but different experiments, I think is probably a better word, in taking yourself into extreme situations, bicycling across the country on bamboo bicycle, going down to South America without a passport, traveling, with very little money or no money. You did the trash me. Tell everybody a little bit about the trash me that you did.
Sure. I did have a passport when I went to South America.
Okay, you did have a passport with that one?
I had a passport, just no money, no
Yeah, that's what it
credit
was.
cards, and just had to travel through South America without money. Um, but Trash Me, yeah, that project was, the average American creates 4.5 pounds of trash per day. That's 135 pounds a month. That's, almost a ton, 2,000 pounds per year. And in a lifetime, it's over 100,000 pounds of trash. It's flabbergasting. But we never really have to think about it. We just throw our garbage in the garbage can. The garbage trucks pick it up, and it's out of sight, out of mind. So I wanted to create a visual that would help people to understand how much garbage just one of us creates, and do it in a way that would be, thought-provoking, get people to self-reflect on their lives. So I lived like the average American, and I wore every piece of trash that I created. Every day I added all the trash. by the end, I was wearing 87 pounds of trash everywhere that I went in New York City, and it really did do its job. It caught people's eyes, and it just got them to realize how much trash one person creates.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. I know I told you this before, but some of the my audience might not know about this. But those who saw us on tour this past summer, we did 58 city tour called the Liberate Your Mind tour, and I was giving speeches and talks about these types of topics as well as a number of other issues. But one aspect of that is promoting mindfulness, promoting low waste, close to zero waste lifestyle. So I was inspired by Trash Me. And so the five of us who are traveling around the country together were each being very conscious and aware of this fact that we're producing 4 pounds, the average person is producing 4 pounds of waste per day. And so we would talk about this every day, and we had our trash bag in we had stuff that we knew we could recycle and stuff that was probably end up being waste. And definitely we were able to heavily favor the at least recyclable stuff, but the whole goal was to just make us more mindful of what we're producing, and do we need to buy that, do we need to consume that. And it was interesting because specifically with you're traveling on the country in an RV, so you're living in the RV, and so this bag, after 3-4 weeks on the road, it wasn't monstrous. I think at the end of every trip that we took, there were 2, 3, 4 week trips, we totaled the average of like 0.2 pounds per person per day, so we were doing pretty good. But even the fact that the bag is like in the middle of the RV, right? So somebody asked, can we move the bag to like the back so it's not in the way? And I was like, that's the whole point. It's supposed to be in the way. For me, it's to make us more mindful and like, hey, this is the things that we're producing. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with another friend a while back that really, obviously your work has heavily influenced my views on environmentalism, because much like you, like I cared about the planet prior to, the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, but not in a very, actionable, mindful, realistic way, just kind of abstractly like, yeah, I care about the planet. I hope things could work out fine, but not thinking holistically and how my actions affect things. And so I started to rethink these things after discovering your work and our previous talks. And a friend of mine, he got me thinking about waste in a different way because, and I don't know what the answer is, but he kind of pointed out to me that people taking trash and putting it on the curb, and then somebody comes along, picks it up and takes it away to a landfill, is the ultimate example of out of sight, out of mind. People just want they want their streets to look fine, and they don't really care if it's going somewhere else, and maybe leaking into the water and the soil and all these kinds of things. And so this friend of mine was pretty much like, I don't know that it's better for me to throw my waste into the trash. Why, maybe it's better that I just leave it on the ground and litter in front of my house so that people pay attention more, So he was just kind of asking these questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that whole issue.
Yeah, a few years back, I saw something online. I've only seen one person ever say this, and it was the landfill is just organized littering. We're just throwing our trash in nature. It's just a socially accepted form of throwing our trash in nature because the whole world is nature. So, I mean, I don't disagree with him because most of our problems in Western modern society are so out of sight, out of mind that allows our culture to continue decimating, everything that we are. So, yeah, I mean, a what we call a proper waste services system is both a curse and a blessing at the same time. And one of the big things that I've learned is there is no easy answer to any of this. There is no, like, people like to make the issues like these black and white, right and wrong. But everything's gray. Everything has its pros and its cons, and everything, even the most positive things, have their hidden things that you don't think about until you've been immersed in something for years. So, yeah, I mean, that's the reality, is that it could be that our modern trash disposal is actually the bane of our existence, not helpful. Of course, in many ways it is helpful. It reduces disease. It helps us to live this form of society. So in that way, people consider it amazing. But we know that this form of society can't go on forever. It's got to stop sometime, somehow, whether that's in a positive way or a disastrous way, we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point there, is it works for this type of society, like and like you said with disease, okay, so it helps us to, compile all the waste into one specific area. So it's not just distributed all over and we're not living amongst it. Like some some of our brothers and sisters unfortunately do in different parts of the world. They live in their waste, right? So that's not a part of what we consider a civilized society. We've got to the point where we're civilized enough to put it in one pile, right, and bury it or burn it or whatever we can come up with. But obviously better solutions are needed. So let's go into the new project. We've talked a little bit about, the experiments and zero waste, low waste. You talked about trash me. Now let's talk about two recent things that have taken place in your life. One, moving to Florida, and not just to Florida, but into a tiny house. So let's hear about that. And then your newest food foraging project.
Yeah. So I'm spending 2 years in Orlando, Florida. Not, people always say, why the heck are you living in Orlando, Florida? It's like one of the corporate capitals of the United States. Disney World is here and all that, or Disneyland, whichever it is. But I'm here because I feel like Orlando is a place where I can affect positive change. It's a middle ground place where it's not like deep south where no one's going to necessarily listen, but it's not, New York City or Austin, Texas or something like that, where there's already so much going on. So it's a great place for me to affect positive change. So I built a little tiny house. It's 100 square feet, 10 by 10. I built it for under $1,500. I really want my life to be accessible to others. I want others to be able to look at what I do and be able to, be able to access it. Some tiny houses are $100,000. Most people watching this don't have $100,000 for a tiny house. So I built it out of 99% secondhand and repurposed materials. And during the whole build, I created just 30 pounds of garbage. And the average house in the United States, like 3,000 square foot house, is something like 8 tons, like 16,000 pounds of garbage or something like that. And then, my current project is for 1 year. I'm growing and foraging 100% of my food. No grocery stores, no restaurants, no dumpster diving for food to eat. Literally growing or going and foraging 100% of my food from I keep using this word nature. Nature is just a concept we've come up with. The earth and nature are inseparable. Humans are inseparable from nature. But when I mean foraging, I mean just non-human grown food.
So you're saying non-human grown food, does that include, well, I guess I think I saw in the video that you are like, if there's somebody who's got a fruit tree in the neighborhood, that's okay. That's part of the deal, right? That's
sort of. So if someone has a fruit tree that they actually, planted and they take care of it and they eat the fruit from, then that's not considered foraging. But if there's fruit trees that are basically abandoned and now are just run by nature and not, human is not involved, then I consider that to be urban foraging. So there's definitely gray areas, as in anything, there's gray areas.
Yeah. So, okay, before we get more into the food foraging, I want to go back to the tiny house. We've talked a little bit on this channel about tiny houses and different type of living styles in general. I have some friends who live on buses or live on boats and all kinds of different things. So people here are definitely interested in alternative ways, and especially those that are more sustainable and less impactful. And me personally, I'm a minimalist, and I always have been. Like, I get a little bit stressed out when I have too many things. Like, personally right now, I think I have too many things in my life, and it's serving the goals I need at the moment, but I'm very much looking forward to getting rid of and unloading some of these things. And I also like giving things away to people who I know are going to make more use of them than I do. But what's the biggest change for you to go, or, I know that you haven't had a traditional lifestyle in a while anyway, so you're not going from like, a 2-story house in the suburbs down to a tiny house, which, let's say some of the viewers, that might be a very big change to them. What would be your advice to them as far as adjusting to something like that, from a bigger type of living situation down to something like you have?
Yeah, it's all about taking it one step at a time. It's very easy to, watch inspiring things online and look at our lives and look at the life that we want and, see this gap, this massive gap, and just feel overwhelmed and not really feel like anything is possible because we feel so overwhelmed. My recommendation is you got to start with where you are. You can only be you. You can only be you in the time that you're in and in the location that you're currently in. You have to embrace that, and you have to start there. So for me, I only got down to living in this tiny house by years of downsizing, because if you have tons of stuff, it's hard to imagine living in a tiny house. So, when I started to realize I wanted to live a life less based on stuff and more based on, purpose and passion and connecting to people and experiencing the life that I wanted, I decided, well, material possessions aren't so necessary for that. And in fact, they're getting in the way. So what I started to do is I would do an exercise where every 6 months I would go through basically everything in the house, and I had a 3-bedroom apartment at the time, and I would say, does this bring worthwhile value to my life, or is it taking away? And also, have I used this in the last year or not? And if the answer was no to those questions, then I would get rid of it. And, over a period of a few years, that's what got me down to having the amount of stuff where I could then move out of my 3-bedroom apartment and into the tiny house that I lived in San Diego. But overnight, never could have done it. Not at all. The reason that any of this has been successful for me is because I haven't been overwhelmed by the big picture, but instead have been very focused on setting small goals. Because even if you don't make it to the big picture, even if you only get halfway, that could mean half the amount of bills, half the amount of debt, half the time more to be doing what you love, and that right there is a success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made some really good points there, a couple of really good points, that it is easy for people to watch videos on YouTube or to follow Instagram accounts and see various people like living these amazing lives. They're like, oh wow, they're growing all their own food, they're living in a tiny house, they're zero waste, and then turn around and look at their house full of possessions, or things like that, or they don't have a garden yet or anything like that, and just to feel kind of overwhelmed and never take that first step. And so I do think it is important to recognize that where you are now, as you show on your website, this is a timeline of events. This has been a journey going on. Like, we're all constantly on journeys, right? So if you're at a point in your life right now where you're not happy with the amount of bills or debt, or the contribution that you're leaving to the planet, the impact that you're having, and the source of your food, and all of these different questions, then you could just use this as inspiration to take those first couple of steps and not be overwhelmed. Now, with the food foraging, let's hear a little bit more about that. So I remember seeing a post a while back, and I don't know if this is related, but you had either planted a whole bunch of some kind of root, or you found some, right? Was that part of your foraging? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have 3 main staples as far as my calories, which are yucca or cassava, sweet potatoes, and yam. The picture you're referring to is actually wild yam that grows here in Florida. Dioscorea alata is the genus and species, and it's amazing. One yam can get up to 160 pounds. That's more than I weigh from one yam. The biggest that I've dug up is 25 pounds, but that's one yam. That's 5 days of all of your caloric needs as a average 2,000 calorie per person type of thing. So we're talking about an amazing thing just growing freely in nature, that is incredibly sustaining and sustainable to harvest. So that's where I've been getting some of my food from the wild yam.
Yeah, and so now you said that, like you said, if there's a plant, if there's a fruit tree and it's kind of been left alone, no humans are interacting with it anymore, it's just doing its thing, then that could be a part of your foraging. Like, for example, here in Texas, there's pecan trees all over the place, and that's a great resource. And in my neighborhood, we've at the community house I was living in recently, we would use a website. Well, we would use nextdoor.com to kind of communicate with our neighbors and say, does anybody have any fruit trees that are just they don't take care of anymore, and we can just come by and harvest them? Or we would use I'm sure you've heard of it, fallingfruit.org, and that people just kind of crowdsource showing, hey, I found an avocado tree. When we were going on tour, we would use that just to show people there's food all over the place. Like, we found avocado trees in the middle of San Francisco, like all kinds of awesome, like huge avocados. And so there's a lot of resources for these kinds of things. Now, I did want to say though, so what you're talking about is, I guess, different from what some people refer to as like freeganism, right? Because a freegan would take something out of a dumpster, would take anything, but you're not going to be drinking at bars. You're not going to be taking. So when somebody says, "Hey, Rob, I want to buy you a drink," no thanks. You're not going to be buying any processed foods. You're not going to be doing anything that isn't coming straight from the earth in its original condition, essentially, right?
Yeah, correct. Someone couldn't even bring me a carrot from their own garden for this year because they grew that and I didn't. So yeah, it's really. I mean, I've done the whole dumpster diving to raise awareness about food waste. I've eaten possibly thousands of pounds of food from dumpsters, and that's a big part of what I like to do is one of my central missions is raising awareness about food waste. But this project's just different. I've proved that you can live off of the waste of our society, and not just live, but thrive. This is not about that. This is about showing that I can live off of the earth, not off of society. Now, of course, again, there's gray areas. I'm still a part of society, and that's a big part of the idea. Is I don't want to be removed from society, because my purpose is to be here showing people. So, what I'm doing is extreme, but the idea of this isn't that I want people to come out and I don't want people to say they're going to forage 100% of their food. It's really about just inspiring people to start going to the local farmers market and supporting local farmers, starting to grow a little bit of their own food, starting to know where their food is coming from, just these basic things. And my hopes through this project is to have it as a gateway of inspiration and education for other people to start.
And that's why I love all your projects, man, because I do think that it takes those of us extremists, if we will, in different ways to kind of push the boundaries a little bit, right? And somebody goes out there and does something super extreme, traveling the country, wearing their trash, only eating foraged food for a year. Like you said, that might, and hopefully we push people a little bit further on their individual journey. They're maybe at the point where they've been interested in this type of thing, but they haven't gotten involved at their local community garden yet. And maybe this pushes them over that edge to that next step, or they start going to the farmers markets once a week or a couple of times a week. And just those little things that we do make progress. And I know that both of us also feel a sense of urgency with just things going on with the planet and the environment as well. And that, I know for me, can be overwhelming. How do you keep yourself from being overwhelmed with just the doom and gloom predictions about the future of this planet and, focusing on creating individual change?
Yeah, I mean, on a rare day, I'm overwhelmed, but for the most part, I'm not overwhelmed. Now, that's not because I have a positive outlook for the future. The reality is that I don't think humans are going to make it. Like, I looking at everything, everything from the past, there's nothing that leads me to believe that humans can take this situation and turn it around and save ourselves. But the thing is that doesn't bring me down, because first of all, 99.9% of all species who have ever lived have gone extinct, and I think that'll happen to humans too, and that's just a natural part of existence and of life. But the reason that it doesn't overwhelm me and get me down is because my goal isn't to make humans exist forever. My goal is that while I'm alive, to improve the quality of life for the people that are here today and for the next generations to come. I can only do what I can as a person. Like, I'm only one person, and I can only take on so much responsibility. So I don't overload myself with more than is really my responsibility. Like, the human race deciding to use the earth as its trash can is not my responsibility. Just because I was born in 1986 into this time, where this tumultuous time, it doesn't make any of this my responsibility. But I do believe that it's a valuable thing to live in a way that is in alignment with our beliefs. And again, I believe that all lives matter. Human life, other species life. And so if during my lifetime I can live in a way that actually brings value to humanity and improves the quality of life to people around me and to other species around me, then I've done a good job. And that's all I can really be responsible for. And so I have no reason to be overwhelmed, because I'm winning. I am a success at being a positive impact. And
I would say absolutely you've been a success at that. And those are some great points there. So the last two questions I want to ask you come from your blog, and just I think a little bit more about your personal philosophy. The first one relates to a post I saw about your desire to be transparent in regards to any sort of financial contributions, I think is what it was aiming at. And the tendency for some influencers or role models, whatever we want to call them, people on social media who gain influence, to sometimes fall under the spell or the money of various corporate influences. Why is that important to you?
Well, truth is one of the most important things in life. Even if I wasn't speaking to you or to anyone and I was just living a life on my own, still truth is of the utmost importance. Truth in my own mind, but truth in what's coming from my mind and going to other people. And the main, the main preventer of truth today, one of them is money and financial influence. One of the big ones is money in politics. It's one of the main drivers of that entire system, like being barely functioning. And so I want to be a life that's not influenced by money. And I have there's plenty of temptation. Like, money is offered to me in different ways that aren't in alignment with my beliefs. So for me, I've had to but chosen to make personal public vows that commitments that require me to live in a way that's in my ethics. And by putting them out there and making them like clear and transparent and public, it makes it easier for me, because then the gray areas aren't there, because I've already said, here's what I will do and here's what I won't do. And so yeah, it's about living the life that I want, but it's also about then setting an example. I hope that people at corporations and politicians can see that and say, oh, now that's transparency. If I speak of transparency, that's real transparency. That's what I want to be. So it's definitely about being an example and just being a human being that's not influenced by all this junk. I just want to
absolutely just being a principled, consistent person. And that's, I think, honestly what it really comes down to. And over the last year or two, I've tried to increasingly focus on that in my message and my, any opportunity I have to speak to an audience, whether that's 2 people or, at a big event, thousands of people, right? Because I've seen that, like you, I'm not trying to necessarily save the world or save the human species. I just want to do something that while I'm here on this planet, it fulfills me and makes me feel good about the way that I'm living. And I know that just not caring, just being, wasteful or whatever, it doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel like a failure in different ways. So I'm just doing what I need to do to make myself feel good. But I've been trying to encourage other people to see that these ideas, these concepts, these movements, they definitely have the ability to be influenced by corporate advertisers. And these can be people who paint themselves as green companies, right? But it's still the same money. It's still the same, same old thing that we see from that old system, right? It's just what people call greenwashing, right? Or a company tried to use some trendy words or something like that, right? And it's easy, I think, to get into this this cycle of just going to festivals to hear about important ideas or conferences, right? But it becomes after a while about, are you wearing the right kind of costume or the right look, or do you have the right this or that? Just to me, just kind of a carbon copy of a lot of the problems with the mainstream world. And I think the message can get lost in that. So I try to emphasize to individuals at these events, like, what really matters is what we do when we go home. Come here, have a good time, meet people, network, enjoy yourselves. Like, you should enjoy your life for sure. But if we're truly about change, then what matters once we leave those places and we go back to our normal worlds, what do we do then? Do we implement those changes based on the ideas we just heard about and the people we met? Or do we just go back to the same old thing? And I think it's clear which path actually provides value and leads to potential change and which path leads to more of the same. So I really think it's important for people to think about that these things, it just takes being a consistent, principled person and just applying your principles to every area of your life. And that's why I like to refer to it as holistic activism. Is just looking at every area of your life, the source of your food, the type of food you're eating, your money, where it's coming, all those different things, and asking yourself, are these things, these relationships, which is what they all essentially are these relationships in line with my values and principles? And if they're not, then focusing on that and working and seeing what you can do, like you said earlier, step by step, to get yourself to a point where you are in line with your values. Now, the last thing I want to mention, another blog I saw there, you are not vegan, and it seems like you have actually thought this out and thought some of your concerns or your ideas and your beliefs on this. So I want you to share this, because I have an audience. Some of them are vegan, some are not vegan, but I think that your views on this will be interesting to both parties.
I mean, it's a good segue what we were just talking about moving into this, because one of the things I wanted to say is the reality is that most of the environmental movement is kind of BS. I mean, so much of it is influenced by corporate interests. And most of the environmental messages that get to us are not pure. Um, and and because of that, we have a very uninformed, like generally most of us are fairly uninformed. It's very hard to be like, well, I shouldn't say uninformed, but like accurately informed is maybe more of along the lines. Because most every media organization has its agenda. Most people have their agenda, and of course, most of the corporations do as well. So, that leads us perfectly into veganism. I was vegan for 2 years, and I've been mostly plant-based. The vast majority plant-based for the last at least 5 years. And there's this idea that kind of runs through the environmental movement, that one idea, there's this picture, like a popular saying is, you can't eat meat and be an environmentalist. And there's these like black and white statements like meat is murder that really have taken a strong foothold in the environmental movement, and really try to make it seem like veganism is the one and only superior diet. It's the most compassionate diet. It's the only way that you can live, that you can eat in an environmentally friendly manner. And I actually believed that for a few years because of the media that I consumed, like Cowspiracy, for example, was one documentary that influenced me quite a bit. Now, the problem that I've learned through 7 years of immersing in environmental issues and social issues is that there is no black and white. Every black and white statement is incorrect. Almost every black and white statement is incorrect, I would say. And so veganism, for example, the truth that I believe behind veganism is that in some circumstances, veganism is the most environmentally friendly diet, but in many circumstances, it is not. One of the main issues behind veganism is that veganism is dependent upon the globalized, industrialized food system, because you don't find examples of veganism in history, almost none, of cultures of people that are actually living in harmony with the land and vegan. It's not really a thing. Veganism really is built on the backbones of our destructive society, and it's only by getting to this point that allows veganism. That's kind of the difficult.
Can you elaborate on that a little more? Like how the circumstances led to veganism?
Okay, so sure. So, okay, if you look at the history of the human race's diet, we don't have examples of humans pre-industrialization and globalization that were vegan, that were living, which meant that they had to depend on their land, because just a few hundred years ago, everybody had to depend on their land. Now, over the last few hundred years, we have been able to live in a way where we don't depend on our direct land. Because of globalization, we can take resources from anywhere we need in the world to meet our own needs. Now, the problem with and this is something that anybody who really knows about globalization is what globalization does is it takes from someone else to give to someone else. So typically, globalization benefits the most privileged people in the world, typically Western societies, but it pillages the land of other people. So this is the globalization that has allowed us to have the current food system that we have. The problem is that veganism is dependent on that pretty much. I mean, there are outside examples of it, but a vast majority of all veganism is dependent upon globalization and industrialization, which ties deeply into many of the main problems that exist in the world. And so I believe that the most humane diet often is one that is far more connected with the earth. The issue, though, is that anybody who gets that much more connected with the earth sees typically that animals need to be involved because it's an intricate part of the cycle. So, this idea that the only compassionate diet is veganism, well, I would actually what I believe is that some people who kill animals actually kill less animals than vegans who live in the city who are dependent upon a globalized, industrialized food system where the death is outsourced and they don't see it. Just as an example, grocery stores have rat traps and rat poison. So nothing we get at the grocery store is death free. And that's just one example of it. So it's a difficult thing to say as a vegan, having been a vegan myself for 2 years. The only way I can sum it up is just it's a whole lot more complex than documentaries like Cowspiracy and such, want to make it seem. It's just not black and white. It's extremely complicated and intricate, and it's a matter of many things combined. And yeah,
Lots of good points there, man. I'll just take a moment to respond to some of that. I definitely, as well, have been influenced by Cowspiracy over the years, and I can't remember if I had been vegan prior to that, or I believe I was already. I mean, I know I was already vegetarian, but I don't know if that was the final push, or can't remember exactly. But I also have come to the conclusions that things are not as black and white. I still remain vegan to this day, but let me just tell you a couple experiences that definitely helped me open up to that. For one, spending time on my grandma's farm. I know that different vegans have different lines that they draw, right? Like most vegans, the definition generally is like anything involved with animal products, byproducts of animal exploitation, right? And of course, we're thinking strictly of like, did the animal die to be on your plate, right? Or did the animal have to be in a cage to get milked, or things like that, right? But then there are also these sort of external costs that you were discussing, like, well, if you're going to buy from the grocery store had to mow down that whole patch of forested land and drive out all these deer, and there's just so many different steps and involvement that no diet is really victimless or completely guilt-free or anything like that when it comes down to it. And the more time I spent on my grandma's farm, one of my chores was to go feed the chickens in the morning and go in there. And so I'd spend some time in there, and I definitely consider myself very close, like spiritually connected to animals. I try to talk to them and have conversations or connect with them on some level, however that sounds. And I had a chance to connect with the cows after being there long enough, and have them come over and like start giving me kisses and giving attention and affection, and say like, I'll never eat any of your family. This is just not something I want to do. And that's my grandma's farm, so she chooses to raise cows and then slaughter them and sell them, and that's how she does it. But when it came to the chickens, the one area where I was like, I actually did a video asking, and it seems silly to some people. I asked, is it theft to take eggs from chickens? Because I went into there and I would go into the coop, and when they're sitting on the eggs, whether or not it's going to produce a chick or not, they're sitting on there because they believe it is. And so they're holding on to it, right? And there's just something about it felt wrong to me. And again, this may be silly to some, to go in there. My grandma was like, just lift them up, and if there's eggs, take them and go on about it. But when they're obviously like pecking at me and like, get away, like I want to sit on this, even if there's no chick coming, right? Like it's just some part of me was like, is this wrong? Like, is this wrong for me to come, like move this animal, just get out of my way, lift it up for my purposes and take what I need from it? And it really got me thinking about it. But over time, I started to kind of feel like, well, they're laying the eggs one way or the other. These chickens, they have a symbiotic relationship with my grandmother. At the end of the night, if there's no coop for them to go into, they know that there's danger out, and they'll try to go up into the trees to get away from that danger. But if you build a coop, they know to go in there and they can hide and be safe, and there'll be food and all these kinds of things. And outside of like the slaughter part, that's where I personally would cut the line. Like where I would draw the line. I don't see that as being exploitation, right? Like just building them a house to lay eggs in, right? Other vegans would disagree. And so I started to see, I'm like, not everything is black and white. And I also understand that, to me, this is the diet that I've decided on, and that seems to be working well for my body after years of, like you, partying and just eating like crap and not taking care of my body. Vegetarianism and veganism has been very good for me. But I also recognize that we are all very unique with different bodies and different body chemistries and different histories and different healths. And it's kind of impossible to say that there's any one diet that would be perfect for any single person. And also, where did you grow up? What were the environment and the resources? All these things are going to impact the way your body responds to certain foods and things like that. So it definitely is not a black and white situation. And then, I think that it is a good argument that some people will counter, and I don't think they're typically coming from a compassionate place. They'll say things like, well, plants are alive too, right? And this is something I've written about. I do think plants are alive, and coming from a native spirituality, everything is alive as far as I'm concerned. So as you said, some people are hunters, but I think they probably have more respect and reverence for that animal in some cases than the people who aren't meat eaters and who are like, maybe they don't eat meat, but they're no more connected to the planet or to the animals or to the plants they're eating than, anybody else. But it does, I think, sometimes create this us versus them mentality. And unfortunately, there are a lot of militant vegans that push people away, or are very much like, yeah, there's this, black and white view of, oh, you're not vegan. And I have friends like this. I definitely have friends that I know, like, I'm in certain situations and I'm like, man, I don't think some of my friends would be okay sitting at this table right now. And it's just, I don't know. My point here is that it just feeds into the further division, I think, that we already see among our species. And instead of having an adult, compassionate conversation about these issues like we're trying to have here, it's just, you don't have the same diet as me, which you don't have the same skin color as me. You don't have the same political affiliation as me. It's just, let's focus on the differences and divide from there, right?
Yeah. And I agree with everything you said. And importantly, I want to say I support being vegan 100%. Like, I think that it's an amazing thing, and I don't want anyone to think that in any way that I don't support people being vegan or vegetarian. I just don't support the idea that veganism is the one and only superior diet for the 7 billion people, or that it is the one and only most sustainable. And that is just, I just think it varies so much, and that's the beauty of the human race, is that we are incredibly diverse, and that means different people have different needs all over the world. I just, one thing I was just thinking about yesterday, bees, honeybees. I keep bees, and a lot of vegans are not into, they're totally anti beekeeping. I was just thinking about it, and I also think plant lives matter, like you do, and that plants are far more complicated and complex than we think. I was thinking about it. I've been to maple syrup farms, and hooking up thousands of trees with pipes together, where you're sucking the life force out of those trees and sending them into this barrel through this huge system. It's
pretty invasive.
Like, that's pretty invasive. I think that, to be honest, that's more invasive than beekeeping. And so it's just like, it's just, again, like, my main message is nothing is black and white. Let's just go deeper. And I think you feel the same way. We got to go deeper with everything, like cut through the greenwashing BS and go way deeper than mainstream.
Absolutely. I think you just made an argument for maple syrup being added to the vegan no list. But I definitely agree with you there, man. I just want to throw one other thing out there. For those who haven't heard me talk about this before, a great tool to do this, to connect with people, is learn compassionate communication or nonviolent communication. There's a great book out there you can find on that, but it's just effective, simple steps to learning to communicate with people who you might not agree with necessarily. And it can be applied to any and all situations, just identifying, the certain things. Somebody is feeling a lack. They're feeling like one of their needs aren't being met. And you can really get around that and connect to the person on a real human level instead of just letting conversation break down. And along with that, I would say a great place to do that is face-to-face, less so on the internet, where it seems like conversations kind of devolve very quickly. And the last thing I want to share with you, Rob, you might not be aware of this. I know some of my audience might be, is that you actually made it into my third book, Manifesto of the Free Humans, because as I've told you before, you did greatly influence my my view on sustainability and environmentalism. And I had already been kind of looking into these areas in a kind of a general way, but once we started talking and once I read your book, I just read your book in a matter of days, and it reminded me of some of my own personal journeys. But there's a section here where I do mention you as a great example of someone living a low impact lifestyle without the force of law. Because personally, I am an anarchist and I don't call for government action. I prefer people like yourself who lead by example and show people the things that we as individuals and as communities can do. There, and I know not everybody will agree with that perspective, but to me, that's what I love about your work, man. And I just kind of made a mention of a few of your projects in here, and basically just asked the question that, what would it look like if everybody was inspired to do things like you do and actually take action, as opposed to just sitting around and waiting for somebody else to solve those issues for us, right? So I want to just, again, thank you for your efforts, man, and for everything that you have done, and the people you continue to inspire, because you're still an inspiration to me, and I look forward to us reconnecting in person. Let everybody know where they can find all your work.
Absolutely. And I got to say, you and I are in an interesting combo, because we obviously think very much the same, but we've obviously got some different ways of going about it. Like, you're more of an anarchist, although there's plenty of anarchy in me. Most people wouldn't
But I love that,
See
man.
me
I think
as an
that's what's
anarchist.
great. And this is what I'm saying is that, I long ago stopped looking for people who were just like me or anything like that because I see so much of myself and other people, and I think the reflection, back and forth. But I've got a lot of dogmatic friends on all sides of the political spectrum or activist spectrum who won't work with people if they don't have the same, oh, you're not vegan, I can't work with you. The thing we were just talking about, right? And that it just limits people so much. We have so much to teach each other and learn from each other.
Well, that's what I like to see with your work is that you really do a good job of bringing people together and keeping it truthful, which is
Awesome.
great.
Thank
So
you,
keep
brother.
that
And
up.
so the website, let everybody know the website one time.
Yep, it's just robgreenfield.org, and if you just type in my name, Rob Greenfield, into mostly I use Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube are the main spots
Awesome.
to
Thank you so
join
much.
along.
Everyone check out Rob Greenfield. You can find him online all over the internet. Follow him on Instagram and YouTube. And maybe start your own foraging challenge or low waste challenge or trash me challenge. Take some inspiration from all the hard work that Rob has done and just get started, get yourself started. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.